The Sony a6700 is an amazing camera. I personally use it every single day here in the studio and on site with clients. However, it does have its limitations. So in this video, I'm going to share with you what those limitations are, what I do to overcome them, and by the end of this video, you're going to know how to get the most out of this small-sized but powerful camera. Let's talk about it. The limitations. Yeah. This camera overheats in 4K. It is an APS-C camera, so lots of people argue that the footage quality might not be that great. You may not be able to get a blurry background like you can with full-frame cameras. And also, if you're doing client work and you show up with this small-size camera, well, you might not be taken as seriously. However, I will share with you that I use this camera every single day in all sorts of different situations, both here in the studio and with clients. I use it for live streaming, conference calls, talking headshots like this. I use it as a B cam, an overhead cam. I'll put it on a slider or a dolly, and it's nice and lightweight and small and compact. This is a hybrid camera, so if I need to take photos on site, lots of times I turn to this camera to do that. And I'm going to share with you exactly how I do that next. I treat the a6700 like a Swiss Army knife. I need to be able to grab it very quickly out of my bag and capture whatever it is that I need very quickly. So I use custom settings in this camera to do this. If you want to set up custom settings, all you do is set the camera up how you want it. And then you're going to go into your menu. You're going to set your custom settings to either C1, C2, or C3. And then that way, once those settings are all set up, all you have to do is toggle between the three, and you're going to get what you want to get. So I set C1 up as a 1080 or HD at 30 frames per second. I set C2 up 30 frames 4K, and then C3 is typically 60 frames 4K. I just have the PP off setting as the color profile. As far as photos go, same thing here, except what I'll do is I'll just go into aperture priority mode if I need to take any photos on site. Again, I am primarily a video shooter, so oftentimes photos are kind of an afterthought or just something I need to grab in the moment. So I'll just go into aperture priority and I just let the camera do all the work based on whatever aperture I want. So obviously the lower the aperture, the blurrier the background, and I can make those adjustments for whatever photo I want to grab very quickly and easily. Typically speaking, if you're shooting with an APS-C camera, you are not going to be able to get as blurry of a background as you will with, let's say, a full-frame camera. There's a lot of moving parts that go into this, but mostly it has to do with sensor size, but also it has to do with lens availability. So if you look at APS-C lenses, it's difficult to find a lens that has a low aperture. However, I have been using the Viltrox 27mm f1.2 for a while now on my a6700, and wow, the blurry background that I can get with this lens is unbelievable, and it matches up with the kind of blurry bokeh background effect that you can get with a full frame camera. So I use this lens a lot for talking headshots. If I really want to separate the subject matter from the background, if I want my footage to look cinematic, I also use it for product videography and photography. And man, this lens is amazing. It's nice and bright, it's super sharp. And if you are looking to add a lens with a very low or fast aperture, I definitely recommend picking up the Viltrox 27mm. So overheating. If you shoot in 4K for an extended period of time, your camera is going to overheat. Now, if you're shooting in 4K 24, it's not going to overheat as quickly as it will if you're shooting in 60. However, what I do to overcome overheating is I'll use an external fan like this one. It's made by Ulanzi. You can pre-charge it. And of course, you are limited by the battery life on this fan, but it does work. And also, it does introduce fan noise. So if you're going to use this fan on your camera, I recommend not using a shotgun mic that's right on top of your camera, but use a wireless mic or a lavalier mic and place that audio source as far away from the camera as you can. The next thing to overcome overheating is probably unpopular, but if you shoot in 1080, you're not going to run into any overheating issues with this camera. If I'm on a conference call or if I'm live streaming, those are the moments in time where I am recording for an extended period of time. So in those cases, I'm shooting in 1080. Here's the thing. Even if you're shooting in 4K, you're limited by your video capture card. You're also limited by the software that you're using. So if you are capturing in 4K, chances are the software won't even stream in 4K. Most people's internet can't even handle 4K. And in fact, most people's internet can't even handle 1080. So a lot of the times these software applications are broadcasting in 720 anyways. So don't worry about shooting in 4K for everything. Use 4K only when you need it. And if you're shooting small bursts of 4K footage, all I do is I'll turn the camera off if I'm not using it and turn it back on while I'm using it. And I don't run into overheating issues when I shoot this way. Additionally, if you don't absolutely have to use 4K, just don't use it. Use 1080 and you won't run into this issue. So just like any camera, you are limited by the amount of power that you use. There's two ways that I get unlimited power with my A6700. The first is I use a dummy battery. If I'm live streaming or if I'm on conference calls, I will use this dummy battery that just plugs into the wall, so you have unlimited power. And it's just something you don't have to worry about while you are doing these types of activities. Now, if I'm on site with a client, I am going to use a V-mount battery. I'll go over how to set this up with your camera a little later in the next segment. But for now, just know that there are two additional ways to extend the power lifetime of your camera while you're on site or in the studio, and those are the two major ways. When it comes to doing client work, I hate to say it, but the size of your camera does matter, especially if you are charging higher prices. If I showed up on site with this little Sony a6700 and the smallest lens that I have, which the 27mm lens is pretty small in size, there is always a chance I'm going to get laughed at, or I'm not going to be taken as seriously as I would like to be taken. So what I do when I go on site with this camera is I'm going to build it up a little bit. I'm going to make it look bigger, but also as far as functioning goes, I build the camera out in a way that makes it so that it functions in its best capacity while I'm on site. So the first thing is choosing a camera cage. The first cage that I use is this half cage by Small Rig. This one is great because it has multiple mounting points if I need to add a monitor, a top handle, additional audio like microphones or anything. I have lots of different options with this cage. On the bottom, it also has an Arca Swiss mount, and this is really important for me and my workflow. I use this mount for all of my tripods. And also, I'm going to show you in a minute, we're going to stick to that extended power, that external power option here in one more moment. The second cage that I turn to is this L-shaped cage. I use this anytime I need to mount my camera in landscape or vertical mode while I'm on site with a client. I mentioned before, I use the A6700 to capture social media footage, vertical footage. This cage has that Arca Swiss mount on both the bottom and the side. So if I need to change the orientation of the camera, I can do so very quickly. So depending on the circumstance, I'm going to either use the half cage or I'm going to use this L-mount cage. Now, the Arca Swiss mount not only works for my tripods, but it also works for this next accessory that I'm going to go over. This is also made by Small Rig. This is going to allow me to attach a V-mount battery to my setup. So the dummy battery that I spoke about earlier is one that plugs into the wall. So this means that I can't really take the camera around and be mobile with it. But if I use a V-mount battery setup, it's going to extend the battery life on the camera. I can shoot for longer periods of time, and also I can be mobile. So the great thing about this bracket is it works with the Arca Swiss mount on both of the cages that I use. All I do is I'll place the cage, I'll just slide it right into this bracket. Once the camera's in place, I'll just attach my V-mount battery. I'll use this cable. It's a dummy battery to D-tap cable. All I'll do is slide one end into the battery slot on the camera. The other end plugs right into my V-mount battery. And now I have a full-size rig. I can still attach this to any of my tripods. I have a long period of time that I can shoot with this camera because of the V-mount battery. And this makes the camera look bigger. It makes you look more professional when you're on site shooting with a client. And finally, if you want your footage to look cinematic and you want that blurry background, I recommend grabbing an external ND filter. I like these NDs by Nisi. They don't give you that vignetting, and I like the color of these ND filters, the color that's introduced into the footage. And so once you have all of these items in place, you have this nice size camera rig that can shoot in any type of situation. You can switch back and forth between all of your settings, grab what you need very quickly. And this is how I have overcome all of the challenges and limitations associated with the Sony a6700. Again, I use it every single day, and this is exactly how I use it. So let me know in the comments below if I missed anything. How are you overcoming the limitations associated with the Sony a6700? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up before you head out, and also subscribe if you enjoy videos like these. Thanks as always for tuning in, and I'll see you again in next week's video.